Hey, what's up, lightboltjoe here. Today we're going to discuss the May 2023 final book, Last Canto of the Dead and Outlaw Saints novel by Daniel Jose Older. So this is the final book in the duology of the Outlaw Saints books, first being Ballad and Dagger, second being Last Canto of the Dead. So, 386 pages long. This took me forever to read because the format just lost the momentum. You split the characters, so Cella and Matteo are together, and then they're split. So then there's Matteo's stories going on in Brooklyn, then there's Cella's stories going on San Madrigal, which is now back after it was sunk, and then it came back. So then it's a matter of what's going on now, right? The momentum died very quickly when there's action happening in Brooklyn, and then stop. And then there's action happening in San Madrigal, and then stop. And then back and forth. And it was frustrating. It was very frustrating. Then eventually the both of them are on the island together with their respected groups of things going on. But it's still the same thing. It's still Matteo's story stuff on the island. Build up, stop. Cella's story stuff, build up, stop. And I'm like, oh my goodness. There was points where I literally had to flip chapters to the next section of the same character's story, and it was frustrating. It was very frustrating reading this book. And that's why it took forever to read it, because the momentum kept dying, my attention span would go away, and I'd be like, great, I have to wait another chapter to get to the next point of this. In regards to the Heroes of Olympus books by Rick Riordan, those are different character perspectives, but it doesn't feel like this. When you're reading those, the momentum keeps going, and there's an appropriate send-off at the end of a chapter before then that story continuing chapters later, or vice versa with other characters. But then the stuff mixes and blends. This was very different. This was very abruptly stopping the dynamic of the story, and it was frustrating reading. Aside from that, I don't understand the mythological origin of this civil war that started in 1800. We know that there was a civil war within the Empire Pirates and the Galernos, the Kalita, all that stuff, right? Within regards to reading the first book. And then it's kind of sort of slightly explained within this that one of Matteo's, ancestors, Archibaldo, had access to spirit magic to then make the Bambarudo, who are these, the beasts that we're fighting and talked about in the first book, based off of the fears of spirits, based off the fears of the residents of San Madrigal. Doesn't matter what sect of resident, but that's how these things were created, and he was going to be selling these things to the different empires. And then it wasn't fully explained if that was the cause of the 1800s Civil War, or if that was the cause of the current civil war. We know that the events are currently happening, that the Bambarudo are being made and the spirits have disappeared because he's siphoning their energy, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But is it the same exact thing? Is history repeating itself? I was lost because of the momentum of the stories. I feel like I missed a giant chunk of this, or did I not miss a giant chunk of this? It just wasn't explained. It's aggravating reading this. Aside from my problems with momentum and not understanding, obviously, fully the story because of that, this was a hard rated R book. So when you're reading these books in order, when you're reading the Rick Riordan Presents books, the imprint books, some of us, not all of us, some of us read them in the order that they're released. So the last one we just read was Winston Chute versus the Whimsies, an incredible middle school fluff of a book, right? Had good life lessons along the way, had good action adventure sequences, like good mythology explained. Very, I don't want to say family friendly, but it was a great representation of a young adult book, right? This book is a hard R book, and you have violence galore within this. There's various limb separating of both man and beast. There's just vivid description of internal organs and things just coming now into fruition, and it's just violent, very violent of a book. It's also very political. It's very anti-police, it's very anti-immigration, but then there's the question of what's the difference between immigration and asylum seeking. So it's very political, very, very political in regards to that on the Brooklyn front, not on the San Madrigal front. on the same magical front, there's a slew of violence, but then there's also the, who can you trust and who can you not trust, and who's shooting this person in the face and who's shooting that person in the face. It's very violent. A lot of gun violence in this, a lot of hand-to-hand violence in this. Very violent. And then at the very end, you have Cella and Matteo sleeping together. And I'm like, I don't see how this fits in the imprint, because this imprint was very young adult, PG-13 type of stuff, right? Within regards to violence, in regards to speech. There's a lot of cursing in this as well. It's not the same tone as the other Rick Riordan Presents books. You've talked about, 30 other Rick Riordan Presents books from different authors. I've had problems with some books. I've had, what's the words? Championing of others. I don't see how this fits in the property, and I especially don't see how this is the same. It's not the same tonal book as the first book. The first book is very teenagers doing teenage stuff, but having to deal with real life as well, now dealing with the fact that their island is back after it was destroyed, and how this happened, and how the two main teenagers have the saint spirits inside of them all along and stuff. We at least get some kind of explanation in regards to how that happened and why it's happening. But then there's the giant plot flaw at the end, that if the two of them ever get back together at the end, then the world is going to, disintegrate, because the two magics cannot coexist. But then it's a matter of, well, can they coexist if we get rid of the bad guy? But then what's the point of all of that? It was a very loosely, if we do this, it might happen this way kind of a thing. And then it does, but then it's not talked about. It's weird. It's a weird way of wrapping up a sequel book. Also, the character development doesn't make sense, because the events of the first book happen a week ago, and this book takes place within a week. So book 1 happens a week later, book 2 happens within a week, and Cella and Matteo are now madly in love with each other. And I'm like, where did this come from? Because this was not really a thing in the first book, unless stuff happened between the week. It was a strange read. It was an aggravating read, and it's unfortunate because the mythology is good, but it needed to be more explained rather than sometimes glossed over, sometimes brought about. But again, I don't fully remember if it is fully explained, because the momentum of reading it kept dying at the end of each chapter. I wish it was structurally redone. I wish certain things were explained more, and I feel like certain characters kept repeating themselves a lot. It was not a fun read. It's unfortunate. It was a great concept overall. The first book was incredible. The second book was not. It was very, very adult. I was not in an adult mindset reading this. I was in a young adult book reading Rick Riordan Presents mindset within regards to the last 30-something books we've talked about. It's not the same, and it's fine that it's not the same. But again, if you're going from Winston Chu to then Last Canto, night and day. Night and day. The next one up is, I don't even remember what's my next one up? Last Fallen Realm. That's the next in the books as they're released. And I think that's the third, book 3 of that series. And I remember the first 2 books being as they are presented. Rick Riordan Presents the young adult books. So I'm hoping and assuming, I shouldn't assume, I'm hoping that it's the same tone that the first 2 books have. And it's just weird when you change the tone of your own book series. How did we get from book 1 to book 2 of this particular franchise? I don't know. It's strange. It's strange. In hindsight, it sounded more like this was the final book being written by this writer, especially with the way that they worded the acknowledgments section. It sounded like a this is my last hurrah kind of a thing. Maybe that's why it was so the stuff was punched up a notch. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, Last Canto of the Dead. Gorgeous cover. Absolutely beautiful cover. Representing the 2 main characters. Wonderful cover. No problem with the cover. I'm concerned moving forward now with other Rick Riordan Presents books. But we'll see. I'm hoping Last Fallen Realm will change that mindset. On to the next review. Mahalo.